Welcome back to the Roundtable. I'm Sarah LeDuc. The 76th Annual Tony Awards will be given on June 11th, and friend of the station Jessica Hecht is nominated for Best Performance by an Actress in a Leading Role in a Play for her portrayal of Alice in Pulitzer Prize winner David Auburn's new work, Summer, 1976. Directed by Tony Award winner Daniel Sullivan, Summer 1976 is a two-hander about two young women in Ohio who form an unlikely friendship and learn to navigate motherhood, ambition, and intimacy and help each other discover their own independence. As I mentioned, it's a two-actor cast, and Jessica Hecht's co-star is Emmy Award winner and Tony and Oscar nominee Laura Linney.
One day we were laying out by the public pool with our books, watching the girls splash about. And I must have made one too many snide comments about her choice of reading material. It was Coma by Robin Cook, now that Shogun was done. A step down, if that were at all possible. And she rounded right on me.
You're a snob, Diana.
I am not.
No, I don't mind it. You can't help it anyway. But if I want to read crap during the summertime, I'm going to do it. All that stuff I know you think I should be reading, the stuff I see on your bookshelves, Henry James and Virginia Woolf and Thomas Hardy and Middlemarch, I've read them too. You know, I read all that crap in college and grad school. I'm aware that Middlemarch is better than Coma. You don't have to educate me on that score. It's a controversial stance you're taking, but yeah, when it comes to narrative fiction, George Eliot does have a slight edge over Robin Cook. So can you just please shut the up, let me finish reading Coma in peace, because there's a James Michener book about Hawaii that I am dying to get to next.
Jessica Hecht received an Emmy Award nomination for her performance in the Netflix series Special. She's been seen on television in the limited series Super Pumped and The Loudest Voice, and in her recurring roles in The Sinner, Dickinson, The Boys, and Succession. She's also recognizable to television audiences as Susan Bunch on Friends and Gretchen Schwartz on Breaking Bad. Her film performances include A+, Anesthesia, J. Edgar, Dan in Real Life, Sideways, and many others. An acclaimed stage actress, Hecht's recent Broadway credits include The Price, Fiddler on the Roof, The Assembled Parties, and Harvey. Summer 1976 is running on Broadway at the Manhattan Theater Club's Samuel J. Friedman Theater through June 18th, and Jessica Hecht joins us now. Jessica, hi, so happy to have you back.
I am just happy to talk to you about anything, Sarah, and be on the Roundtable, which I listen to when I'm in my kitchen in Williamstown, Mass. So it makes me very happy to think of being on the Roundtable.
We love it. We love you for listening. We love you for joining us whenever we get the chance to talk to you.
Thanks.
The Manhattan Theater Club production of Summer 1976 at the Samuel J. Friedman Theater on Broadway. How did you first hear about this production and decide that you would do it with Laura Linney?
Oh, well, I did a reading of it, I think very close to the 4th of July last year in 2022. And it just jumps off the page and into your mouth with such ease and such, I guess, emotional resonance. It hit me on so many levels, both because that was a very seminal year in my own life. And I remember my mom being a single mom, and I'm very close to my mom, and sort of thinking about what she was going through. And the play is in essence about being young mothers in 1976. But I also remember my kind of awareness of being a young woman in 1976, and all of that was quite resonant in the play. And the language is fantastic. It's a very, very language heavy play. We speak for only an hour and a half, but we speak a lot. And so I had tremendous appreciation, intuitive appreciation for what it could hold. And Laura is such a fierce, brilliant actress that I had been watching on Ozark with such joy. And I've always admired her from like the first thing I ever saw, probably Tales of the City, or seeing her on stage, really, I think, in Sight Unseen, or something even much earlier. My timing is crazy when I think back to what the chronology of people's careers. But anyway, she's a hero of mine. So the idea of doing it with her was pretty big. Yeah.
Could you tell me more about some of the language, some of the ideas in the story, some of the things about your character that you found so appealing?
Yeah, it's funny. Somebody was asking me about my character and what my relationship to her is, because I guess some people would perceive me as being quite different from her. But I really like her so much. That's what I said, because she's somebody who she hasn't been able to fulfill a lot of the things that by today's standards, were things you would have started to fulfill as you meet her, in essence, she's 28 years old for a large part of the script, 28, 29. And then she jumps forward to being in her mid 50s. And I have to say that she's somebody who is extremely interested in finding herself through experiences. And for a series of reasons, she was unable to keep on track with her schooling. She was derailed by some of the traditional things that people at that time were doing with their lives. And she is trying to still be free and be okay and be all the things that society at that moment in time, when it's like this moment of independence, both national independence and women sort of feeling like they had rights. She's trying to respond to all of that, and it's really hard. And I guess it's not that much different than what's going on now with society telling us that we can be who we want to be, and yet that is still difficult. And she's very impulsive as well in many ways, and I love that about her. Yeah, and her language is super authentic. She hasn't changed the way she speaks from being a teenager, really. She hasn't felt the need to, so she speaks in a way that's very authentic to her. That's all I'll say.
It's written by David Auburn, of course. Were
Yes.
you a fan of his writing prior to this? I mean, I don't imagine you're going to say no.
I only knew Proof and Lost Lake, I think he wrote as well.
Yeah.
And I loved both of those plays. I loved both of those plays. And Proof I see often. I teach acting as well, and my students love to do Proof. And my dad was a physicist, and so that, I think, to anybody who grew up with a father that was a physicist, that play has a certain appeal. But also Mary Louise was like, it was a play that I remember seeing and being really gobsmacked by somebody, my own age, who was doing work that I thought was extraordinary. And Lost Lake, I thought, was also wonderfully written. And he puts language in your mouth that you don't even realize will affect you emotionally in the way it does. And that's the thrilling part of it.
How do you first notice that feeling when you're working on the show? Do certain lines hit you different ways as you rehearse or as you perform?
Sarah, that's a great question. That's a great question. At first, you're so concerned with, in my experience of this play, I was doing another play while I was rehearsing this play in the day. I was doing a play by Sarah Rule in the evenings called Letters from
at Signature Theater. Mm-hmm.
At Signature. And that was really about, that was quite a language play and poetry play. And I played Sarah Rule, and she's extremely eloquent. And that was the language of such a different person. So when I was working on Summer 1976, I just kept feeling like I have to get my mouth around these words and the way in which this other person speaks and not think about it too much. Just let this transformation occur through the language, because this other play is so different that I need to create two very separate characters and almost be mindful about that, not cerebral, but just actually just focus my whole self on what that means. So what I did was to try to just memorize Summer 1976 as quickly as possible. And I did not realize the effect of the language on me until I had it memorized. And then I was just, or at a certain point in there, when I was looking at the number of adjectives and the rhythm and trying to remember things by the number of, he gives you a lot of adjectives and he gives you certain rhythms and certain words get repeated, like whatever. And my character says whatever a lot, and she swears a lot. And I sort of realized the cumulative effect of that as I started to get it off the page and into my body. And I was just stunned and thrilled.
I imagine this wasn't the first time that you've been working on more than one thing at a time, either running a show and rehearsing a show, or running a show and doing a TV show, or, any number of things. How do you manage Ms. Jessica Hecht being three or more people in one day?
Well, I find it a great challenge. I have had the experience a couple of times before with plays, particularly. And in fact, I had this very funny experience when I was doing Streetcar in at Williamstown. I had this incredible experience of doing Streetcar many years ago with Sam Rockwell. So I was doing that, and I was doing a pilot in New York, and it overlapped for about a week. And I was, this is insane. I'm doing the greatest play in the American canon while I'm doing this pilot. And this pilot was very contemporary. And it's not going to say that it was not well written, because it was very interestingly written, but the complexity of it was quite different than Streetcar. And the director was giving me so many notes on the pilot. And what I got flummoxed with was the idea that great writing in some way affords you a foundation to act from that is so rich and so specific. And I kept thinking as I raced into town a few days to do this pilot, in my internal monologue was like, do you realize that this dialogue in this pilot is so rudimentary in comparison? And you are giving me so many ideas about it that the material cannot hold. You want me to like make this into a joke and then cry on this line. It's all fabricated. It's not in the script. And so ever since that experience, I of course didn't say that and just sort of did these things that they were asking me to do. And ever since that, I realized that if it was great material, I would do it. I would do that any time. And also the truth is, you have to just practice. Sounds so dorky, but mindfulness in the way I think of it, which is not to project out of the moment. And it's such an overused phrase, and I think we don't know what it means. But for me, what it has meant is not thinking about how much I have to memorize, or not thinking about, trying not to think about the fact that I'm underprepared or that somebody's going to be let down. Just think that this is a day I will do my absolute best to just focus on what's in front of me. And if I fall short, at least I'll just fall short focusing on what's in front of me rather than spinning out and just falling short as a human being. Does that make sense?
It makes so much sense that I'm like practically applauding in recognition. Summer 1976 is directed by Daniel Sullivan. I could know this, but I didn't look it up. Have you worked with Daniel Sullivan before?
I could talk about this for hours and hours. I have worked with him 4 times. This is the 4th time. The first time was my first big job. My first job outside of school was this incredibly fortunate. First professional job was doing Midsummer Night's Dream with Theater for a New Audience, which is a company I just adore, just beyond. But right after that, Dan Sullivan gave me the job of the understudy in the Heidi Chronicles, which was Wendy Wasserstein's Pulitzer Prize was winning play, and this remarkable experience. And so because I understudied, I only worked with him the day I was going to go on at the Kennedy Center when somebody was out, but I understudied 8 characters, and I was constantly watching rehearsal and performance and was in awe of him. And of course, Wendy, who I think Dan had developed all of her new work. And then after that, I did Julius Caesar with him, and I played Portia to Denzel Washington's Brutus. And then I did King Lear in the Park and played Reagan, and Annette Bening played Goneril. That was an incredible experience also. But those big Shakespeares were a different thing, because Dan is a master of language. Those big Shakespeares, he directs with such an even hand and such sensitivity. But I never in a million years would have thought I would have such a deeply personal, the personal experience of a 2-hander with him was like being, I guess I would say, it was like being in the presence of a great psychiatrist and choreographer at the same time. If you could put, Carl Jung and Baryshnikov, or who is like one of my favorite people in the world, I guess I could say, I won't say Mark Morris, because he would be too, Mark, any great, I'm just thinking that Carl Jung and Mark Morris would be spicy combination, but what it
That would
is,
be pretty fun.
but what Danny does is just look at the human behavior and the nuances of the story that we would have ownership of, or that we should have ownership of desperately, for the audience to really get in there with us emotionally. He very rarely talks about the emotion. He just talks about very specific moments where he is, he's in need of clarity. And sometimes it can mean emotional clarity, but he'll never tell you what emotion. And sometimes it means just language clarity. But he's so sensitive in the way he directs, and his notes are never what you think he's going to say. He is such a master. I almost can't. I could go on and on about him, but I can't even figure out where to start. But I do think by saying the greatest psychiatrist and the greatest choreographer, I'm in the realm of of where he would live.
Jessica Hecht stars with Laura Linney in David Auburn's Summer 1976, which is running on Broadway at the Manhattan Theater Club's Samuel J. Friedman Theater through June 18th. To learn more, visit manhattantheaterclub.com. Jessica is nominated for a Tony Award for Best Performance by an Actress in a Leading Role in a Play, and the 76th Annual Tony Awards will take place on June 11th. I'm Sarah LeDuc, and you're listening to The Roundtable on W.